what right do you have to violate a contract? Doesn't the Constitution that they wrote up saying in Article 110.1 that no state will obligate a contract? You can't? Or can you come in as an interloper, a third party, into a contract that your mother and father has with someone else and control it? No, you can't. That's international law. That's, and this is what was happening here, that the British corporation, GM, owning all the divisions, the 13 colonies, which is the 5 divisions of GM. And now, once you can get this in your mind, you can now start to appreciate that the whole deal is nothing but corporate law. It's all corporations.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with free land and free this and free people and all that. If you work for GM, you have to follow GM procedures. If I'm walking off the street and walk into GM, I don't have to follow the procedures that the employees do. But if I stay there long enough, I sure do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same thing as why they said in some of the cases in North Carolina that if you don't want to stay in this colony, you must depart out of it. Okay? And then when I wrote in the New History of America, okay, the Lord says, depart out of it. Don't take anything in it. But you can still stay on the land because it's the Lord's land anyway, to begin with, and no man shall own it. Well, then what right does, quote, the state of North Carolina have to say to the people, depart out of it and, be gone because you don't want to join our corporation?
But you're never really allowed to do that.
That's right. That's right, yeah. See, this is where it gets a little the gray area, hard to discern between corporation and government. Government operates as a corporation, but government is a little bit different than a corporation. I mean, in the way they can operate. GM can't assume that the person on the street, they own them. But in government, they can assume that they own everybody that comes into their territory.
All right. And these days, what would justify that?
Well, the fact in a lot of the searches that I've done, the mere presence of being in a state or going by, let's say you're in Florida and you travel up all the way up to North Carolina here to visit me. Okay. Every state that you go through, it's assumed that you will abide by their laws.
Okay.
All right. The same as the people that live there. Well, that's the assumption that they put upon every living man and woman, is that you're here, we own you.
Okay.
That's the bottom line. I mean, that's reality.
So, in other words, it doesn't matter necessarily that you have residency somewhere or a driver's license from a certain state.
Right, yeah, because when you drive through, see, you're an alien and you're non-resident, and you can find that in every state constitution and every state insurance law, is that when you drive through every state, the Secretary of State is your proxy for anything that happens in motor vehicle laws, should you have an accident and whatever. But they are your mouthpiece, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm. So the old idea about departing from the estate, the plantation,
right,
which you'd love to do, and say, good, then I don't have to pay state income tax, blah, blah, blah,
right,
that wasn't going to happen.
No, because the only way, and it's hard because, all right, I'll depart out of the state of, or this state, and I am going to stay in North Carolina. I didn't put state of, I didn't put anything other than North Carolina, a geographical area called North Carolina. And but that's a hard pill to swallow for everybody to understand, and enough people can't get behind that to tell them, the state of,
mm-hmm,
that I'm not a resident in your state. Now, if you look at the resident, and this is, I put in the book, Which One Are You? And it goes in and explaining what a resident is, And a resident means that you are part and parcel of the body politic and have joined such corporation, whether you know it or not, by the mere fact of claiming that this is your state, and so on and so forth. All terms that are legal in nature and not words of common, just, you can say whatever you want in words on the street, and it isn't going to affect you legally. But if you use those words as a term, then it does affect you. It's convoluted. It sounds convoluted, but it's not really. It's a way that they design this country, these laws, so that the average man on the street has no clue that when he opens his mouth and puts foot in it, when he's talking to any government people, he's talking legal terms. He thinks he's talking words, but it's a legal term that they know and are using against them. The old term, you open your mouth and you convict yourself. Sure, because you're talking words. You're not thinking terms. You're not thinking legalese. And that's just the sad fact that is how the Bar Association, the lawyers, were given control of the country to write all the laws and to do everything, because take a look at the original founders. 55 of those people were lawyers. And they all came from the British Crown. They all came from the Crown Temple. Well, naturally, if you go in and look on the history of the American Bar, which I put on the ATG Press, I took the excerpts from a large volume of the history of the American Bar by Charles Warren. Impeccable author, well-known, can't dispute anything he says. But the lawyers back here in this country were frowned upon. Virginia even made it a hanging offense if you practice law. And right before I guess about 1774, the lawyers got enough control that they were starting to overrun the legal system as it stood, so that they could be put in place when the revolution took place, so that after it, they had complete control for the Crown to write the laws as they saw. And that's what happened. So this is just a little bit going way back in history that people don't look at. They only want to go back to the 30s or to the 40s when the income tax started. No, you got to go all the way back to find out what happened as to how the whole thing, piece by piece by piece, came into being. And this is where a real researcher does. And it's only that I was gifted with being taught by the best PhDs in research when I started into this stuff, when I first got out of school. And I didn't care about history in school, and I didn't care about a lot of stuff. This is what's that got to do with today, And it's got everything to do, because if you don't know the foundation of where things started and how they started, you're lost. Well, you look at what's going on today. It's, how can they tax me on this? How can they tax me on that? And what right do they have to tell me about seatbelt laws and what to wear and what not to wear and so on and so forth? But you've got to go back and look at it. Because here in North Carolina, when the seatbelt law and most other states, they said, okay, you can't get a ticket for a seatbelt law. You had to be stopped for some other violation, and if we happen to see you don't have a seatbelt, then we can give you a ticket. Right now in North Carolina, until the 21st of this month, they're going after all the pickups, and it was on TV last night, and they showed this road stop, and out of 3 hours, they ticketed 55 pickup drivers that didn't have their seatbelts. Now, after this, from the 22nd on, it's click it or ticket in North Carolina.
Yep.
And they can stop anybody and give you a ticket for not wearing a seatbelt. They don't have to do anything else. Well, when it first started, oh no, that'll never happen. Well, little by little, they added it on, and now it's $100.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's $100 for all those people that got stopped. Just yesterday, they gave the figure how many tickets they gave. I think it was 55 in 4 hours. Well,
I know.
55 times 100, it's $5,500.
And I listen to this now because it's interesting that North Carolina and down here in Florida would be going through the exact same promotion campaign.
Yeah.
Which makes you wonder where it really comes down from.
It comes from the federal, because
right.
That's what federal is doing. It's telling the people, since the 1966 Traffic Safety Act was passed, that is the criteria which is under federal control. So every state has to abide by the 1966 Highway Traffic Safety. What right do you have to violate a contract? Doesn't the Constitution that they wrote up saying in Article 110.1 that no state will obligate a contract? You can't? Or can you come in as an appreciate that the whole deal is nothing but corporate law? It's all corporations.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with free land and free this and free people and all that. If you work for GM, you have to follow that the British corporation, GM, owning all the divisions, the 13 colonies, which are the 5 divisions of GM. And now, once you can get this in your mind, you can now start to approach GM procedures. If I'm walking off the street and walk into GM, I don't have to follow the procedures that the employees do. But if I stay there long enough, I sure do. Interloper a third party into a contract that your mother and father has with someone else and control it? No, you can't. That's international law. That's, and this is what was happening here